came up with the me bounce thing, y'all ate that up. Because rebounds, me bounce, creep bounce, key bounce, T bounce, C bounce, anything that comes off that board, it's mine. it's
The internet is on fire after reports and speculation exploded claiming Angel Reese had a heated reaction following major tension with the Chicago Sky, and fans are split right down the middle. Clips, tweets, and sideline moments are being dissected frame by frame as people ask one brutal question. What really happened behind the scenes, and why is her situation being compared to Caitlin Clark all of a sudden? Sources close to the situation say emotions boiled over fast. From visible frustration on the court to cryptic social media posts, many believe Angel Reese felt disrespected and unheard, leading to a reaction that shocked even longtime supporters. While no official statement has confirmed every rumor, the optics alone were enough to send WNBA fans into a frenzy. Some say she was unfairly targeted. Others argue professionalism matters more than passion at the pro level. What made things even more explosive was how quickly Caitlin Clark's name entered the conversation. Analysts and fans began drawing sharp comparisons, pointing out how Clark has been praised for composure, leadership, and media handling, while Reese is often labeled emotional or controversial. Supporters of Reese call that narrative unfair and rooted in double standards, while critics argue that star players are judged by results and restraint, not just talent. Social media didn't help. Within hours, timelines were flooded with hot takes, memes, and bold claims suggesting Reese's approach clashed with the organization's vision. Whether true or exaggerated, the damage was already done. The narrative had taken on a life of its own. Former players weighed in, fans picked sides, and suddenly this wasn't just about basketball anymore. It became a debate about image, expectations, and how female athletes are allowed to express themselves. So is Angel Reese being misunderstood? Or is this a case of self-inflicted chaos at the worst possible moment?
Angel Reese plans on remaining with the Chicago Sky after Rocky in the 2025. You may be like, Rocky, question mark? Yeah, you don't remember? She threw all of her teammates under the bus and then ran the bus over them. In that interview that came out, I think it was the Chicago Sun-Times. And her teammates, they wasn't having it.
And why does Caitlin Clark keep coming out of these debates looking untouched while others take the heat? What happened next changed the conversation completely, and the fallout may follow Angel Reese for the rest of her career. The shockwaves hit fast when reports began circulating that Angel Reese's relationship with the Chicago Sky had completely fallen apart. What started as whispers quickly turned into a full-blown firestorm across social media, with fans trying to piece together how one of the most talked-about names in women's basketball suddenly found herself on the outside looking in. Angel Reese, known for her confidence, emotion, and unapologetic personality, didn't stay quiet for long. Instead, her reaction lit up timelines, sparking debates that went far beyond basketball and straight into comparisons, expectations, and the pressure placed on young stars. For Chicago Sky fans, the situation felt surreal. Reese arrived with massive hype, national attention, and a fanbase that followed her from college to the pros. She wasn't just a player, she was a brand, a personality, and a lightning rod for attention. Every game she played drew cameras, headlines, and arguments. Supporters believed she was still finding her footing in the league, while critics argued the production didn't match the noise. When news broke that the Sky had decided to move on, many felt the organization had made a cold, business-first decision that ignored Reese's long-term potential. Angel's response made it clear this wasn't a quiet exit. Through emotional posts, cryptic messages, and visible frustration, she let the world know she felt disrespected and undervalued. To her supporters, it was the raw reaction of a competitor who felt blindsided. To her critics, it was proof that she struggled with accountability at the professional level. Either way, the reaction only intensified the spotlight, turning a roster decision into a national debate. Almost immediately, the comparisons started flooding in, especially with Caitlin Clark. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Clark, praised for her on-court efficiency, calm demeanor, and record-breaking performances, has been embraced as the face of the league's next era. Reese, on the other hand, represents something different: swagger, emotion, and confrontation. The problem is that the WNBA, fairly or not, often rewards one archetype more than the other. As fans argued online, the narrative quickly shifted from "why did Chicago let her go?" to "this is why she's no Caitlin Clark." That comparison stung, and Angel seemed to feel it. Sources close to the situation suggest she believed she wasn't given the same patience or protection that other young stars received. She reportedly felt boxed into a role, criticized more harshly for mistakes, and judged as much for her attitude as for her stat line. In a league where visibility is everything, Reese's personality amplified both her support and her backlash, and Chicago's decision only poured fuel on that fire. Behind the scenes, this moment raises bigger questions about how franchises handle high-profile rookies. Was Chicago expecting instant dominance? Did they underestimate the adjustment period from college to the pros? Or did Reese's outspoken nature clash with organizational expectations? These questions remain unanswered, but what's clear is that this wasn't just a basketball decision, it was a cultural one. As Angel Reese processes this moment, the league watches closely. Some believe this setback will fuel her comeback, pushing her to prove every doubter wrong. Others think this incident exposes the gap between hype and professional consistency. Either way, this chapter marks a turning point. Angel Reese is no longer just a promising rookie. She's a symbol of the league's growing pains, its evolving identity, and the uncomfortable truth that not every star is embraced the same way. And this is only the beginning of what could become one of the most talked about redemption arcs in women's basketball. The story didn't explode all at once. It crept out in fragments, whispers, screenshots, and clipped quotes that spread faster than any official statement ever could. One moment, Angel Reese was still being talked about as the emotional heartbeat of the Chicago Sky. The next, her name was trending for all the wrong reasons. Fans woke up confused, trying to piece together what actually happened. Was she really fired? Was this a suspension? A fallout behind closed doors? The lack of clarity only made the situation feel more volatile, and Angel's reaction became the center of attention before the facts ever fully settled. What people noticed immediately was the shift in her tone. Angel had always been outspoken, confident, unapologetic. That was part of her brand. But now, that confidence sounded sharper, more defensive, almost wounded. Subtle changes in her social media behavior didn't go unnoticed. Stories went up and disappeared. Posts carried heavier language. The smile that usually framed her public image felt replaced by something closer to frustration and disbelief. To many, it looked like someone who felt blindsided, someone who believed they had given everything and were now being pushed aside without warning. Behind the scenes, speculation ran wild. Some insiders claimed there were clashes over leadership and expectations. Others hinted at locker room tension, disagreements over roles, or frustration with how the franchise was being positioned in the media. Angel, known for wearing her emotions openly, was never going to fade quietly. If she felt disrespected, people expected fireworks, and that's exactly what many believe they witnessed. Her reactions weren't polished press releases. They were raw, personal, and sometimes messy. For supporters, that honesty made her human. For critics, it became ammunition. And then came the comparisons. They always come. Caitlin Clark's name entered the conversation almost instantly, not because Angel brought it up, but because the public did. Different personalities, different styles, different media narratives, yet constantly placed side by side. Where Caitlin is often framed as calm, composed, and system-friendly, Angel is painted as fiery, confrontational, and hard to manage. Whether that framing is fair or not is debatable, but perception shapes reality in professional sports. Some fans began saying the quiet part out loud, that the league rewards one type of star more than another. Angel's reaction only intensified that debate. Instead of going silent, she leaned into her emotions. Some saw it as a meltdown, others as a justified response to being undervalued. Her words carried the weight of someone who believed she was being made an example of. She didn't just sound angry, she sounded hurt, betrayed, and determined to prove that this moment would not define her. To her supporters, this wasn't going nuts, it was standing her ground. To her detractors, it was proof that she couldn't handle adversity at the professional level. What made everything more explosive was the silence from the organization. No immediate clarification. No strong defense. No clear explanation. That vacuum allowed narratives to grow unchecked. In the absence of facts, emotion filled the space, and Angel's reactions became the story instead of the decision itself. The focus shifted away from basketball and toward personality, image, and control. It wasn't just about whether she stayed or left, it was about who gets protected, who gets labeled difficult, and who the league is comfortable building around. By the end of it, one thing was clear: this wasn't just a roster issue. It was a collision between identity, expectations, and power. Angel Reese didn't fade quietly, and whether people loved or hated her response, she forced everyone to pay attention. The question now isn't whether she's no Caitlin Clark. It's whether the league is ready to handle stars who refuse to fit into a single, comfortable mold. By this point, the conversation around Angel Reese had shifted from basketball to something much bigger: perception, power, and narrative control. Whether the reports were exaggerated, misunderstood, or selectively framed, one thing became clear: the public reaction was no longer just about what happened behind closed doors, but how Angel Reese responded once the story went public. Social media became the real battleground. Clips, tweets, and headlines began circulating at lightning speed, many of them designed to provoke rather than inform. Supporters argued that Angel was being unfairly targeted, saying she was held to a different standard than other players who expressed frustration or challenged leadership. Critics, on the other hand, framed her reactions as emotional, unprofessional, or proof that she couldn't handle adversity. The truth likely lived somewhere in the middle, but nuance rarely survives online. What intensified the situation was the constant comparison to Caitlin Clark. From the moment both entered the WNBA spotlight, fans and media outlets positioned them as opposites. One portrayed as composed and universally embraced, the other as outspoken and polarizing. Every move Angel made was instantly contrasted with how Caitlin would have handled it. That comparison didn't just shape fan opinion, it influenced how narratives were written and shared. Former players and analysts weighed in, many pointing out that emotional reactions in sports are nothing new. They argued that passion has historically been celebrated, especially when it leads to winning. The difference, they said, lies in how certain athletes are allowed to show that emotion without consequences, while others are labeled as problems the moment they push back. This debate reignited long-standing conversations about race, gender, and image in women's sports. Angel Reese's supporters emphasized her track record, college dominance, cultural impact, jersey sales, and her ability to draw attention to the league. They questioned why a player who brings visibility and revenue would suddenly be framed as expendable or disruptive. To them, the backlash felt less about basketball decisions and more about control, who gets to speak, and how loudly. Meanwhile, critics focused on accountability. They argued that professional leagues require players to adapt, even when situations feel unfair. From this perspective, public frustration, no matter how justified, can complicate team dynamics. Whether those criticisms were fair or selective became part of the larger argument consuming sports media. What's undeniable is how quickly the story escalated. One report turned into speculation, speculation turned into viral commentary, and viral commentary hardened into assumed truth. For many fans, the headline became the reality, regardless of what actually happened internally. That's the danger of modern sports media. Once a narrative sticks, it's nearly impossible to reverse. Behind all of this was a deeper question about what kind of league the WNBA wants to be. One that embraces individuality and raw emotion, or one that prioritizes quiet professionalism above all else. Angel Reese, intentionally or not, became a symbol of that tension. Her situation forced the league, fans, and commentators to confront uncomfortable questions about consistency and fairness. As the noise grew louder, one thing became increasingly obvious. This wasn't the end of Angel Reese's story. Whether she stayed silent, spoke out, or reinvented her image, the attention surrounding her ensured that whatever came next would be watched closely. Some athletes disappear after controversy. Others use it as fuel. At this stage, the debate was no longer about a single decision or reaction. It was about legacy, how players are remembered, who gets grace under pressure, and who is expected to simply endure. And with every comparison to Caitlin Clark, the spotlight on Angel Reese only burned brighter, setting the stage for what could be the most defining chapter of her career. By this point, the situation had grown far beyond basketball, turning into a full-blown media storm where perception mattered more than paperwork. Even without any official confirmation of a firing, the idea that Angel Reese had been pushed out or turned on by the Chicago Sky took on a life of its own online. Sports debate shows, social media personalities, and casual fans began framing the story as a referendum on Angel Reese herself, her personality, her brand, and whether she could coexist with an organization that was trying to redefine its future. The conversation quickly shifted from team decisions to character judgments, and that's where things escalated. Critics accused Reese of being too loud, too confrontational, or too focused on attention rather than development, while supporters pushed back hard, saying she was being punished for confidence in a league that often celebrates the same traits in others. The truth became less important than the narrative people wanted to believe. What made the moment even more volatile was the constant comparison to Caitlin Clark. Whether fair or not, Reese has been tied to Clark in the public imagination ever since their college clashes, and this controversy only intensified that dynamic. Online debates framed Clark as the safe, marketable, and league-friendly star, while Reese was cast as the disruptive figure who challenged comfort zones. This contrast wasn't based on on-court production alone. It was about tone, body language, and how fans interpret emotion. For Reese supporters, the backlash felt familiar, a pattern where outspoken athletes are labeled as problems instead of competitors. For critics, it reinforced their belief that teams prioritize stability and image over star power when tensions rise. The result was a polarized audience. Each side convinced the situation proved their long-held views. As the discourse grew louder, Angel Reese's own reactions became central to the story. Any social media post, liked comment, or vague message was treated like evidence of anger, frustration, or defiance. Some interpreted her silence as resentment. Others saw it as strategic restraint. The reality is that modern athletes are under constant surveillance, where even ambiguity is weaponized. Reese didn't need to say she was upset. People assumed it. She didn't need to criticize management. Fans filled in the blanks. In this environment, emotion becomes a headline, not a human response. That pressure can turn even routine organizational decisions into personal battles played out in public. Meanwhile, league-wide implications began to surface. Commentators questioned how young stars are supported when they bring both attention and controversy. Is the WNBA truly prepared to embrace players who generate conversation beyond the court, even when that conversation isn't always comfortable? Or does the league still struggle with how to balance authenticity and marketability? Angel Reese, fairly or unfairly, became the symbol of that tension. Her presence challenges traditional expectations of how female athletes are supposed to behave, and moments like this expose how fragile that acceptance can be when conflict arises. What often gets lost in the noise is basketball itself. Reese's rebounding ability, defensive presence, and competitive edge are not imaginary, they're measurable. Yet during controversies like this, performance takes a backseat to personality. Fans begin debating whether someone fits rather than whether they contribute. That shift says as much about sports culture as it does about any single athlete. Teams are no longer judged solely on wins and losses but on optics, headlines, and online sentiment. Players feel that shift immediately, especially those whose brands are built on intensity rather than neutrality. At the same time, it's impossible to ignore how fast public opinion turns. One week, an athlete is celebrated for passion. The next, that same passion is labeled as instability. Angel Reese's situation highlights how thin that line can be. The idea that she went nuts becomes shorthand for a much deeper conversation about how frustration, competitiveness, and self-advocacy are perceived when they don't come wrapped in politeness. Whether the situation involved internal disagreements, misunderstandings, or nothing as dramatic as rumors suggested, the reaction revealed how ready people are to believe the worst when an athlete doesn't fit a preferred mold. As this chapter unfolded, one thing became clear. Regardless of what actually happened behind closed doors, Angel Reese was no longer just a player navigating her rookie years. She had become a lightning rod for broader debates about respect, race, gender, and power in professional sports. That's a heavy burden for any athlete, especially one still carving out her place in the league. The story wasn't just about Chicago, or contracts, or comparisons. It was about who gets grace, who gets labeled, and who is allowed to be unapologetically themselves in a league still finding its identity. The final stretch of this story isn't really about contracts, headlines, or even the Chicago Sky as an organization. It's about perception, pressure, and how quickly public narratives can spiral when an athlete becomes a lightning rod. Over the past few years, Angel Reese has existed at the center of non-stop conversation, where every gesture, quote, or performance is magnified beyond the court. By the time rumors, speculation, and exaggerated takes began circulating online, the story had already taken on a life of its own. Fans weren't just reacting to basketball anymore. They were reacting to what Angel Reese represents in a league still defining its next era. That context matters, because the emotional intensity surrounding her situation didn't come from one moment, but from years of scrutiny, comparison, and expectations that few young players ever face. What made the reaction feel explosive was how fast narratives formed without patience or nuance. Online commentary framed events as proof of instability, entitlement, or failure, while supporters argued the opposite, that Reese was being unfairly judged under standards not applied to others. This push and pull reflects a broader issue in modern sports culture, where athletes are no longer evaluated solely on performance but on likability, silence, compliance, and branding. Angel Reese's confidence, visibility, and willingness to embrace attention have always made her polarizing, and in moments of uncertainty, that polarization intensifies. Some interpreted her emotional responses as weakness, while others saw them as the understandable frustration of a competitor navigating relentless pressure. The comparisons to Caitlin Clark only poured gasoline on the fire. Whether fair or not, Reese and Clark have been positioned as opposing symbols. Two stars with very different styles, personalities, and media narratives. For some fans, praising one has meant tearing down the other, as if women's basketball only has room for a single archetype of greatness. That framing ignores the reality that the league grows when multiple stars shine in different ways. Angel Reese's physicality, intensity, and emotional edge bring something distinct to the game, just as Clark's shooting and calm demeanor do. Treating that difference as a flaw rather than a feature says more about audience expectations than about the athletes themselves. As the noise grew louder, it became clear that the biggest damage wasn't to reputations or locker rooms, but to discourse. Reasonable conversations about development, fit, coaching philosophy, and growth were drowned out by viral clips and exaggerated headlines. In that environment, any reaction, whether silence or emotion, gets weaponized. If Reese stayed quiet, critics would claim guilt or avoidance. If she spoke out, they'd label it as going nuts or being unable to handle adversity. That no-win scenario highlights the double bind many athletes face when they don't conform to a narrow image of how they're supposed to act. What often gets overlooked is that professional athletes are still human beings processing uncertainty in real time. Careers don't follow straight lines, and moments of conflict or transition are normal, especially early on. Growth in professional sports is rarely clean or comfortable, and the strongest players are often forged in periods of tension, criticism, and self-reflection. Angel Reese's story, regardless of how this chapter is interpreted, is still unfolding. One moment, real or rumored, does not define her ceiling, her resilience, or her long-term impact on the league. Ultimately, this chapter says less about one player and more about the environment surrounding women's basketball right now. The league is growing fast, attention is intense, and narratives are being shaped in real time by social media outrage cycles. In that kind of spotlight, mistakes are magnified and emotions are judged harshly. But growth, both personal and professional, often happens in exactly these uncomfortable spaces. Whether Angel Reese responds by recalibrating, refocusing, or redefining her role, her journey remains far from over. And if history has taught sports fans anything, it's that today's controversy often becomes tomorrow's comeback story. This story has sparked massive debate across the basketball world, with fans split on what really went wrong between Angel Reese and the Chicago Sky. Emotions are high, opinions are louder than ever, and comparisons to Caitlin Clark have only added more fuel to the fire. Was this a management failure, a clash of personalities, or a turning point that could redefine Angel Reese's career? Now it's your turn to speak. Do you think the Chicago Sky made the right decision, or did they let go of a generational talent too soon? Can Angel Reese bounce back stronger and silence the critics, or does this moment expose deeper issues she must overcome? Drop your thoughts in the comments, join the conversation, and share this story with other basketball fans who are following every twist of this saga. Stay locked in for more updates, reactions, and deep dives, because this controversy is far from over, and the next chapter could change everything.